share the same territory. He thinks it's his yard and he's letting me live there. But I almost never see him. Sometimes in the winter I'll see tracks that he leaves in the snow. And sometimes he leaves little other traces around. But they're mostly nocturnal. So only once, maybe once a year or so, do I ever actually see him. And what I was doing when you came in was I had my blank here and just roughing it out. The way I cut it out was I did the profile first. I cut that out on the bandsaw, and then I turned it over so it'd be flat on the table. I just sketched in my pattern. If you actually photocopy the pattern and try to lay it down, because the surface is curved, then it doesn't line up exactly right. So you have to fudge a little bit when you're drawing your pattern on. You can just freehand it with a pencil and then just draw in some of the details and then rough it out. You can rough it out in the bench with a gouge if you happen to have a setup that works that way, or you can just take a knife and just whittle off the large corners. This actually saves a little time if you've got a place you can secure it. Remember, whenever you're using the gouges, you want to have that fastened down in the bench securely, and then keep both hands on the tool. Don't ever try to hold it and cut with the other hand. That always makes me nervous when I see that. We'll take some off the front here. Now, foxes are mostly nocturnal. And I've seen traces of when he comes around, because there'll be tracks like in the snow. And he comes around into the yard and he hunts in the grass there. They like to eat moles and moles and mice in the wintertime. And in the summer, they like berries. Let me get that roughed out. We can just kind of pull out our chair and our knife and sit down and relax. I remember one winter I was out shoveling out my driveway and I noticed this big pounce mark in the snow. And I could see the fox tracks, and then there was this leap, and it must have been a good 12 feet from the tracks into the snow, and where he had heard a vole or something under the snow. It was like 6 inches of snow, and had figured out where to get it and pounced on it and got it. They can pounce about 15 feet, which is supposed to be pretty good for an animal. Even a kangaroo, they say, can only go about 4 feet at a jump. And when they pounce, it's like a cat. They'll just jump up in the air and then all 4 feet down go bump. I'm just rounding the corners off here. When you're carving, the two techniques that really work the best for using a knife is one is called the levering cut, where you just kind of brace your left thumb against the back of the knife and just use a little bit of a levering motion or a scissoring motion. Or you can also use the paring cut, and that's where you brace your thumb against the block and then just slowly close your hand and draw your knife through the wood with a motion like that. Remember, you don't want to ever just grab that and pull it like that. Don't ever do that, because that's not safe. You have no control, and you really can't carve very well like that. It's just plain unsafe. I'm going to carve around his ears a little bit here. Yeah, it's coming along. One of the best looks I've had at foxes was over at a nearby town. And one spring, I drove by, and there was a fox family, a mother and two kits, out sort of playing alongside this old country road. And I drove a little beyond, stopped the car, and then walked back just a little bit, not too far from the car, just enough where I could see. And these kits were out there hopping around and playing. And they were like a couple of kittens. It was incredible. They were just kind of pouncing around on each other and wrestling. One of them would see a leaf blowing by and it'd jump on it just like it was hunting. All 4 feet just go thunk. And it was really kind of a neat show. And then one of them started sort of prancing up to me, sort of twist sideways and sort of hopping up like he was sort of wanted me to play with him. And about that time, his mom came out of the edge of the woods where she'd been watching all this and said, "Come on, Junior, these are people. Maybe we don't want to get too close." But it was a really, one of those kind of magical moments. And it went on for about 20 minutes that morning. It was neat. Foxes will dig burrows and they make dens. You can tell a fox den. I remember an old Boy Scout master I had that said one way to tell a fox den from a skunk is if you go up to this hole and it smells like a skunk, then it's a fox den. If the smell lifts you off your feet, then it's a skunk den. So then you know to be careful. For doing the face, what I'm going to do is draw a little line down the center here. I find that helps to organize it. And then just pencil that in. That'll give us some guide marks. And then we can pare away that wood. I'm using white pine here, which carves nice, but it can tend to split just a little when you're going sort of parallel to the grain here. So I'm going to take off little shavings. I find the best way to carve the heads on an animal or a bird or anything like that, where you're working with an unusual shape, that is a non-person shape that we're mostly used to, is to draw the shape from the top and then carve out the top view so it looks right. Then work on the side and do the profile to where it looks right to you. And this guy's pretty close. Take a little more off his muzzle here. And then look at it head on and then just round off the corners and give it the oval shape. And that will give you a very good approximation for getting the tricky shape of a muzzle or a bird's beak or something. That really seems to work the best. Otherwise, if you look at it in terms of just carving the muzzle or the nose or the eyebrows or whatever, you get all hung up in the detail, and it's easy to lose sight of the whole picture. Another place we sometimes see our fox, or evidence of him, he's pretty shy. I almost never see him around. A couple of times when I'm driving up in the driveway late at night, especially if my grass is tall, he likes it when I don't mow the lawn. I'll see a little glimpse of him in the headlights as he's heading off into the woods. But they also like seeds, especially in the winter, and they'll come around to the bird feeder and eat the sunflower seeds I've left for the birds. The deer like that, and the bear like that too. Everyone likes the sunflower seeds, except some of our birds, and they think, oh, we ought to have a higher grade sunflower seed. Everyone else likes them. Now, for shaping the tail, all you need to do is just go around and make a series of notches to separate that from the haunch. And then just kind of round it along there. Where the tail comes up over the front paw, and that's kind of a nice effect because they have a really thick, bushy tail. Just make a little notch there, and just carefully notch that out, and that'll give you the start of your cut. Now, to shape the haunch, an easy way to do that is to use a V-tool, and you can take and, well, let's see, we got a good angle on this. You can use a V-tool to kind of pare away some of this wood in here. You can also carve it with a knife, but this works too. This is just like a paring cut, and I'm just sort of taking and bracing my thumb against it and making short little cutting motions with my tool. Don't ever hold the tool like this and do that kind of a motion, because that you have no control. And once that leaves the wood, there's nothing to stop it. Unless you get in the way. And then but these little short paring cuts work very well. This is a nice project, because you can just kind of sit there and whittle away and have fun. For doing the front paws, I like to start by making a notching cut here. And another one, oh, say about here, where this rear paw will be showing. Oh, I was reading that foxes also like turtle eggs. From a snapping turtle, if they found someplace where they've been sitting there in a sandbank or something, and they love getting those. Kind of a treat. They also eat bugs, crayfish. They have very small stomachs. They'll only hold about an ounce of food at a time. So they only eat a little at a time. And then what they can't eat, they'll sort of cache someplace until they get hungry and come back for it. Or do some more hunting. They're omnivores, and they'll eat just about any small amounts of meat or berries or whatever they can find. Anyway, that's the general idea. And just keep shaping that around, and that gives us our rear haunch. And we can use a V-tool to come down and make this really nice fluffy mane that they have. And then just keep carving down using the V-tool and the knife to shape those feet. One of the things I wanted to show you that's kind of important with this particular guy is for doing the back. And when we get the back smoothed down here, and you're all done with everything, one of the finishing touches that you can do is to texture this fur slightly. They have such a nice, thick, fluffy coat that it's a little difficult to duplicate in something as hard as wood. But one of the ways I found that works quite well is when you get a surface smoothed down, you can take a gouge, like a 10 millimeter number 9, or something that's got a fair amount of a U shape to it. And then you take and just make a few lines sort of in the shape or in the direction that the fur goes. Sort of just make a few cuts. And that kind of gives us an indication of how the masses of fur will fall on this guy. Now, to detail it, what I like to use is a wood burning pen. And this is one that's made by Detail Master that works quite well. It has an adjustable rheostat here, so it controls the amount of heat that comes out and then comes into the pen. And I usually put it about, 70% or thereabouts. And then with a very fine tip pen, you just etch in the various lines of hair. This is the one thing I think takes a little bit of patience. And a lot of times I'll even wear a little magnifier hood that goes over my eyeglasses to help with the detail, because it can get to be a little bit of an eye strain after about 2 hours, which is what it takes. And that's how you texture the fur in. Now when you get done, you're going to have something that looks a little bit like this. What I've done is just gone ahead and textured in all the little fur right up into the face area. The other thing I want to show you here real quick is how you do the eyes. And I use glass eyes that are made in West Germany. And what I do is just take and carve a small hole using a little micro gouge. And as you make these, check it from time to time to make sure that the eye fits in there. It should fit in snug but not too tight, because we need to put some glue in there to hold that in place. When you get it to where you want it, first thing I do is I always clear the chips off, because if I drop one of these eyes in those chips, I'm lost. Take a pair of wire cutters and clip that free. Looks kind of strange sitting there on my bench like that. And then I use some epoxy putty. It comes in 2 parts. And you just kind of mush that together. Size about, maybe the size of a pea or half that size. It doesn't take very much. And work that together real good. This is neat stuff. It has sort of a neutral gray color. And when it hardens, which takes about 2 hours, it's waterproof. Now when it's wet, you can thin that down with water and do all sorts of things. So you get that where you want it. Just take and get a little small piece. And then just plunk that right down in the hole that you made. Then take your eye. I'm going to clean off a little of the excess here. Then take your eye and just press that right down in there. I found an end of a pencil works great for setting that, because it kind of gives you a little grip and you can position that. And I scooch it down there a little bit and see how the excess forms. You can take and just kind of work that around the eye. When I'm doing this, sometimes it doesn't hurt to put a little water on your fingers, and that helps smooth it around. So I smooth that in there, and then take the end of a toothpick, and you can shape that and give it kind of an almond shape. If you need more putty, you can just take a little tiny little strip of that and work that in there. And that will give you a very lifelike looking eye. And then just go ahead and do that with the other side. The other thing I wanted to show you today was painting. And to do that, you can use alkyds or acrylics. I think that alkyd paints work pretty good. It's like an oil paint, but it takes a little longer to dry. And it gives you a little more working time. You can also use acrylics if you work fast. Let's see, we'll get ourselves a couple of paintbrushes here. The synthetic sable paintbrushes work quite well for this. For the base coat, I'm using burnt sienna mixed with a little titanium white. If it starts looking too chalky, you can also add some little yellow ochre in there. If you put too much white with a burnt sienna, it can sort of make it look pinkish. You want to avoid that. So paint on your base coat. Now, the color of foxes varies quite a bit. There's black foxes and silver-colored foxes and the red fox that we're most familiar with. Then, take some dark color. Make sure that's dry. I'm just going to wipe that down a little. And when that's dry, you can take, and in those furrows that you put in there with your carving tool, you can darken those, just sort of tone those down a little. And that creates an artificial shadow area. And that makes it look like the fur has depth to it. It's quite an effective illusion. And then you can take a little white and yellow ochre, sort of a lightish color, and dry brush it. And by that I mean you just take and just put just the tiniest little bit on your brush. And on the high spots, just let that stick on the high spots a little bit. And then that sort of creates the illusion of light as it reflects off the top of the hair. And just kind of work that along the whole thing like that. Just put on your base coat and then tone it. And then highlight it. And that makes it look soft and furry and fluffy. It creates quite an effective illusion. A lot of times people come up to these carvings and they'll have to touch them and say, gee, is it really as soft as it looks? And they're surprised to find out that it's wood. The tail is white. The nice thing about acrylic paints is you can just thin them in water. And the tip of the tail is white. And that's the one thing all these foxes have in common, whether it's in the gray phase or the red phase, they all have white-tipped tails. And then you can take your base color and just kind of feather that up into there. And that, by gently drawing that from the red into the white, that avoids any real harsh lines. And that also kind of gives sort of a furry texture as well. And just take your time when you paint it and have fun. And when you get done, you'll have something that looks like this guy. And you can see here these areas where we've worked with the toning and on around. The feet, I just painted black, and then I highlight them, again using a little white paint with just a little tiny bit of blue marked in there, sort of make it look like it's reflected from the sky. For the whiskers, I took an old paintbrush and cut off some bristles and put in there, and just take a little needle and drill a tiny little hole in the muzzle. It doesn't have to go in very far. And then take a bristle, mix up some epoxy glue, and just stick the end of the hair in the epoxy while you're holding it with a pair of tweezers, and then just stick it in the hole and hold it until it dries. Don't put a lot in. Usually half a dozen on each side is all that you really need to give the effect. And that's your red fox. You can use the same painting technique on just about any other type of animal, and it works especially good with the wild animals that have sort of nice, thick, rich coats. And that's our fox. I think you'll enjoy this project. Try it. It's a lot of fun. Well, I'd like to thank you for dropping by today. I've had a very pleasant time. And until next time, I'm Rick Butz wishing you happy carving.
Rick Butz has written 2 books entitled Woodcarving Step by Step, Woodland Creatures and Santas. Rick demonstrates and describes through extensive illustrations and photographs how to carve a chipmunk, a river otter, a red fox, an alpine St. Nicholas, an Adirondack Santa and his bear, and a Swiss St. Nicholas. The two-book collection is available by calling 1-800-950-9648. The price is $29.90 plus shipping and handling.